My parents gave the family restaurant to my brother, so I untied my apron, left without a word, and started a chain that's now their only competitor in town. Hey family! Hit that subscribe button, drop a hello in the comments, and tell us where in the world you're listening from. Alright, let's continue the story. I stood in the kitchen of Mama's Soul Kitchen, my hands trembling as I plated the fried catfish that had become our signature dish. 23 years. That's how long I'd been connected to this restaurant. First as the little girl doing homework at table 6, then as the teenager washing dishes, and finally as the woman who'd transformed our struggling diner into the most talked-about soul food spot in 3 counties. Family meeting in 10 minutes. Daddy's voice cut through the kitchen noise. My stomach tightened. Family meetings were never good news. I wiped my hands on my apron, the same navy blue one Mama had embroidered with head chef Emma 5 years ago when I'd officially taken over the kitchen. Back then she'd hugged me tight and whispered, "This place breathes because you breathe life into it, baby girl." Leroy, my younger brother, strutted in wearing a designer suit I knew cost more than our monthly produce order. He'd been gone for 6 years, chasing some tech startup dream in another state, visiting maybe twice a year for major holidays. Meanwhile, I'd been here every single day, arriving at 4 a.m. to prep, staying until midnight to perfect recipes, missing birthdays, relationships, and everything else. "Looking good, sis," Leroy said, that practiced smile plastered on his face. "Place is really thriving." I nodded, suspicious of his sudden interest. The dining room was packed as usual. Regulars who knew my grandmother's recipes by heart, newcomers who'd driven an hour after seeing our social media posts. Every table filled, every review glowing. My work. My blood. My life. "Let's go," Daddy called again. I didn't know that walking into that dining room would be the moment my entire world shattered. We gathered at the corner booth where Mama and Daddy sat looking uncomfortable. My sister Elizabeth was already there, fidgeting with her phone. She worked part-time as a hostess on weekends, though worked was generous. Mostly she took selfies for Instagram. "Your mother and I have been discussing the future," Daddy began, not meeting my eyes. "We're getting older and it's time to think about legacy." My heart pounded. This was it. The conversation I'd been preparing for since I turned 30. The restaurant would officially be mine. All those years of sacrifice, of turning down culinary school scholarships to stay and help, of pouring every ounce of creativity into making this place special, it was about to be recognized. "We've decided to leave Mama's Soul Kitchen to Leroy," Daddy said. The words didn't register at first. I watched his lips move, heard the sounds, but my brain refused to process them. "What?" I whispered. "Leroy has business experience," Mama added quickly, her voice apologetic but firm. "He knows about management, marketing, scaling operations. You're an amazing chef, Emma, but running a business requires more than cooking." Leroy shifted in his seat, avoiding my gaze. "I've been consulting for restaurants in my area. I have investors interested in franchising. We could turn this into something bigger. I've been running this place for 5 years, I said, my voice cracking. Who do you think handles the books? The suppliers? The staff schedules? Who renegotiated our lease? Who created the catering division that brought in 40% more revenue? You're emotional, Daddy said. This is a business decision. Emotional. The word hit like a slap. I'd given up everything and they called my heartbreak emotional. Elizabeth finally looked up from her phone. It makes sense, Emma. Leroy went to college. I have a culinary degree. My voice rose. From community college, Mama said softly, and that quiet dismissal hurt worse than anything. I sat there, frozen, as they continued talking about transition plans and timelines. Leroy would take over in 3 months. I'd stay on as head chef, of course. They needed me for that. Just not as an owner. Not as family who deserved inheritance. As an employee. We're keeping it in the family, Daddy said. You'll always have a job here, Emma. A job. In the kitchen where I'd created every dish on the menu. Where I'd personally trained every cook. Where I'd spent holidays and birthdays and my entire adult life building something extraordinary from Mama's struggling diner. Say something, Elizabeth nudged me. I looked at Leroy, really looked at him. He wore guilt poorly, but not enough to speak up. Not enough to say, this isn't right. He was already mentally redecorating, already planning his innovative changes. The recipes, I said quietly. My recipes. The new ones I developed. They belong to the restaurant, Leroy said, finally meeting my eyes. We'll keep everything exactly as it is. You're the heart of this kitchen, sis. The heart they were ripping out and throwing away. I thought about the notebook in my locker. 5 years of recipe development, twists on Grandma's classics, new creations that had people driving from neighboring states. I thought about the food blogger who'd called us the best-kept secret in Southern cuisine. I thought about every sacrifice, every missed opportunity, every time I'd chosen family over my own dreams. Emma. Mama's voice was gentle. We hoped you'd be happy for your brother. This is good for all of us. A rising tide lifts all boats. Happy. They wanted me to be happy about my erasure. I stood up slowly, my legs steady despite the earthquake inside me. Excuse me. I need to check on the kitchen. I walked away from that table with my head high, even as everything inside me screamed. I didn't go to the kitchen. I went to my locker in the back hallway, past the employee bathroom where I'd cried after Grandma died, past the office where I'd spent countless nights managing books they apparently didn't think I was capable of managing. My hands didn't shake as I pulled out my recipe notebook, leather-bound, every page filled with my handwriting, notes, sketches. 5 years of innovation. My real inheritance, the one I'd given myself. I grabbed my personal knives the Japanese said I'd saved 6 months to buy. The cast-iron skillet Grandma had given me when I turned 18, saying, this is for when you have your own kitchen someday. Apparently someday would never come. Not here. My phone buzzed. A text from my best friend Karen. Girl, where are you? Table 12 is asking about you specifically. They want to compliment the chef. I stared at those words. Table 12 wanted to compliment me. Not Leroy. Not my parents who couldn't see my worth. Me. I typed back, tell them thank you. I'm gone. Then I did something I'd never done in 15 years of working in that kitchen. I untied my apron. The embroidered one Mama had made. I folded it carefully, placed it on the bench beside my emptied locker, and I walked. Past the kitchen where Chef Ray was calling for me, past the dining room where my parents were probably still discussing Leroy's brilliant business future, past the front door with its cheerful bell that had greeted me thousands of times. I walked into the parking lot, got in my car and drove away from Mama's soul kitchen. I didn't look back. I couldn't. Because if I did, I might have stayed, and staying would have killed everything inside me that still believed I was worth something. The calls started within an hour. Mama first, her voice tight with confusion. Emma, where are you? We have a full house and Ray says you took your knives. This isn't professional. Professional. I'd been professional for 15 years while they were planning to give my life's work to someone who couldn't tell paprika from cayenne. I didn't answer. I sat in my apartment, the small one-bedroom I'd kept despite being able to afford better because every extra dollar went into the restaurant's emergency fund, into better ingredients, into making their business thrive. Daddy called next. This is childish. You can't just walk out during dinner service. We raised you better. Delete. Leroy, sis, come on. We can work this out. I need you there. The kitchen is chaos. The audacity. He needed me. They all needed me. Just not enough to value me. Elizabeth's message was the worst. You're being selfish. This is family business and you're making it about you. Grow up. I threw my phone across the room. It bounced off the couch, undamaged, unlike me. That night, I sat on my kitchen floor and cried for the first time since Grandma died. I cried for the girl who'd believed hard work mattered. For the woman who'd sacrificed everything for people who saw her as convenient, not essential. For every missed opportunity, every relationship I'd let slip away because the restaurant needs me. The restaurant. It wasn't even mine to need. Around midnight, Karen showed up with wine and fury in her eyes. I heard, "Tell me everything." I did. Every word, every detail, every devastating moment of that meeting. "Fuck them," she said, pouring us both generous glasses. "You know what you're going to do? You're going to destroy them. Karen. I'm serious, Emma. You're the talent. You're the magic. That place will crumble without you and you know it. I woke up the next morning with a headache and a clarity I hadn't felt in years. Karen was right. I'd spent 15 years building someone else's dream while neglecting my own. No more. I called my cousin Raymond, who'd been begging me for years to partner on a restaurant venture. He'd made his money in real estate and wanted to invest in something meaningful. I'm listening, he said when I pitched the idea. Come to my office tomorrow. Next, I reached out to Chef Martin Hayes, a former instructor who'd been disappointed when I turned down his recommendation for advanced culinary training in France. I knew you'd call eventually, he said. What do you need? Everything, I told him honestly. I'm starting from scratch and I'm going to need mentorship on the business side. You've got it. Let's meet this week. I pulled out my recipe notebook and started documenting everything systematically. Not just recipes but the stories behind them. Techniques. The suppliers I'd cultivated relationships with over years. The farmers who saved their best produce for me because I'd helped them during a rough season. The networks and connections that were mine, not the restaurants. My phone kept buzzing. Mama, Emma, we need to talk about this reasonably. Daddy, you're hurting your family. Leroy, the kitchen staff is threatening to quit if you don't come back. That last message made me smile. The staff. My staff. The people I'd trained, mentored, protected from my parents' sometimes harsh management style. They knew who really ran that kitchen. Within a week, 3 of my best line cooks had called me privately. Miss Emma, when you start your spot, we're coming with you. I didn't encourage them. I didn't have to. Loyalty isn't demanded. It's earned, and I'd earned theirs through years of fair treatment, proper training, and genuine respect. Raymond's office overlooked downtown. A stark contrast to the strip mall location of Mama's Soul Kitchen. I've been waiting for this conversation for 5 years, he said, sliding a business plan template across his desk. I've watched you transform that place. Imagine what you could do with proper resources and full creative control. We talked for 3 hours. Raymond had already scouted potential locations. Empty restaurant spaces with good bones, areas with high foot traffic and growing demographics. He'd run preliminary numbers, calculated startup costs, projected revenues based on Mama's Soul Kitchen's success. The difference, he said, leaning forward, is that this time you'll own it. 75% yours, 25% mine. I provide capital and business infrastructure. You provide the vision and execution. 75%. More than half. More than anything I'd ever been offered for 15 years of work. There's one property I think you need to see, Raymond continued. It's available now and the owner is motivated. It's 3 blocks from Mama's Soul Kitchen. My breath caught. 3 blocks. You built their success, Raymond said quietly. Why shouldn't you compete? Why shouldn't I? The question rattled around my head as we drove to the location. It was a former Italian restaurant closed for 6 months, with a full kitchen that just needed updating. The dining room had beautiful bones, exposed brick high ceilings, large windows that flooded the space with light. I walked through slowly, mentally redesigning, reimagining. This could be something special. Something mine. The rent is reasonable, Raymond said. The landlord loved Mama's Soul Kitchen, ironically. When I mentioned you, he was immediately interested. Apparently, his family eats there twice a month specifically because of your food. My food. Not the restaurants. I'll need 6 months to build this right, I said. Raymond grinned. Take 8. Do it perfectly. We're not rushing into anything. We're building an empire. For 2 months I worked 18-hour days, but for the first time I was working for myself. Chef Martin connected me with a restaurant consultant who helped me refine the business plan. We crunched numbers, projected growth, planned every detail. The restaurant would be called Emma's Table. Intimate, personal, honest. Not trying to be Mama's Soul Kitchen, but something entirely mine. Elevated soul food with global influences. Dishes that honored tradition while pushing boundaries. Leroy called once during this time. Emma, things are falling apart. 3 more kitchen staff quit. Our quality is slipping. Customers are complaining. We need you back. Name your price. I'm building my own restaurant, I said simply. Silence. Then, you can't do that. That's disloyal. The hypocrisy was stunning. Disloyal? Like giving away someone's life work to a person who hasn't stepped in that kitchen in 6 years. This is different. We're family. Family doesn't dispose of people when they're inconvenient, I said and hung up. That night, Mama showed up at my apartment. She looked older, somehow tired. Baby, please. Let's talk about this. You're destroying what we built. What you built. I stepped aside to let her in. Mama, I love you, but let's be honest. That restaurant was dying before I took over the kitchen. You know it, Daddy knows it, Leroy definitely knows it. You're my daughter. I always planned for you to be part of. Part of, I interrupted. Not the owner. Not the leader. Just a part. An employee. After everything. Mama's eyes filled with tears. Leroy has education connections. And I have talent, dedication, and 15 years of making your dream succeed. Why wasn't that enough? My voice cracked. Why was I never enough? She couldn't answer. She left 20 minutes later and I cried again, but less this time. The grief was being replaced by something stronger. Determination. 8 months after walking out of Mama's Soul Kitchen, I stood in my own restaurant on opening night. The space was beautiful, warm lighting, artwork from local Black artists, an open kitchen where guests could watch us work. My kitchen. My staff. My vision. The menu was extraordinary if I say so myself. Jerk-spiced fried catfish with mango salsa. Oxtail gnocchi with herb butter. Collard green spring rolls. Short rib grits. Peach cobbler creme brulee. Every dish told a story. Southern tradition meets global technique. Comfort food elevated but never pretentious. Raymond had invited food bloggers, local press, community leaders. The reservation book was full for the first month. My former line cooks, now my partners in the kitchen, moved with the precision of people who'd trained together for years. 15 minutes to first seating, Chef Ray called out. He'd been my sous chef at Mama's Soul Kitchen and was now my executive sous chef here, with equity in the business and creative input on the menu. My hands should have been shaking, but they were steady as I checked each station, tasted each sauce, ensured everything was perfect. This was what I'd been preparing for my entire life. The first guests arrived. Karen with her family, Chef Martin with colleagues, Raymond with investors. And then I saw them sitting at a table near the back. Mama and Daddy without Leroy or Elizabeth. They looked uncomfortable but determined. I walked over slowly. I didn't know you were coming. We wanted to see, Mama said softly. Wanted to support you. Support. The word felt strange coming from her. Thank you for coming, I said professionally. I hope you enjoy the meal. I walked away before the emotions could overwhelm me. Tonight was about celebrating what I'd built, not mourning what I'd lost. Within 3 months, Emma's Table was the hottest restaurant in town. We had a waiting list for reservations. Food critics were raving. A major food magazine featured us in their Rising Stars of Southern Cuisine article, with a full-page photo of me in my kitchen and a story about my journey. But the real measure of success was watching Mama's Soul Kitchen struggle. I didn't gloat, I was too busy building my own success, but the reports filtered back through the community. Quality had dropped. Regular customers were disappointed. The magic was gone. Leroy had tried implementing innovations, fusion dishes that made no sense, price increases that alienated long-time customers, menu changes that erased the restaurant's identity. He'd fired 2 of the remaining long-time staff members for not being team players. The restaurant was hemorrhaging money and reputation. Daddy called one evening. We made a mistake. I was silent, phone pressed to my ear, standing in my office looking at the framed photograph of opening night. Leroy isn't working out, he continued. He doesn't have your touch, your understanding of the food, the people. We've lost 40% of our business. We're barely breaking even. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and I meant it. Despite everything, watching them struggle hurt. We want you back. We'll make you a partner. 20% ownership. 20%. After everything. After stealing my inheritance and giving it to Leroy. After proving they couldn't succeed without me. They offered me 20%. No, I said simply. Emma, please. We're family. You need me. You've always needed me. But you only seem to realize it when I'm gone. My voice was calm, factual. I have my own restaurant now. I have creative control, majority ownership, and a team that respects me. Why would I give that up? We're your family. Daddy's voice rose. And you treated me like convenient labor, I replied. I love you, Daddy, but I'm done sacrificing myself for people who don't value me. While Mama's Soul Kitchen continued declining, Emma's table thrived. Raymond and I started planning a second location in a neighboring city. Food Network reached out about a feature segment. Cooking schools invited me to teach masterclasses. I hired a publicist, Karen, who'd quit her marketing job to work with me full-time. She was brilliant at storytelling, at sharing not just the food but the journey. My story resonated with people. The chef who walked away from family expectations to build her own empire. But the sweetest moment came 6 months after opening, when my former staff members at Mama's Soul Kitchen, the ones who'd stayed out of necessity, started reaching out. Miss Emma, are you hiring? We can't work there anymore. It's not the same. It's not home. I hired 3 of them for the second location. Not out of revenge, but because they were skilled, loyal, and deserved to work in a positive environment. Leroy showed up one day while I was prepping for dinner service. He looked defeated, his expensive suit wrinkled, eyes exhausted. Can we talk? I invited him into my office. He sat heavily in the chair across from my desk, the desk in the office of the restaurant I owned. I'm sorry, he said. I was wrong. I knew it was wrong when Mom and Daddy told me, but I convinced myself they knew best. That business degree, those connections, none of it mattered. I didn't understand what you'd built until I had to maintain it. Thank you for saying that, I said. I meant it. His apology didn't fix anything, but it was something. The restaurant is failing, Leroy continued. I'm stepping down. Mama and Daddy are trying to run it themselves, but... He looked at me with desperate eyes. Will you come back? We'll give you 50% ownership. Full control. 50%. Progress. Still not enough. I didn't answer Leroy immediately. Instead, I invited Mama and Daddy to Emma's table for dinner. They came on a Tuesday evening during the quieter weekday service. I'd prepared a special tasting menu. Every dish a reminder of what I could create, what they'd underestimated. We started with she crab soup infused with bourbon, a dish Grandma used to make that I'd elevated with technique and innovation. Then came duck confit with black-eyed pea puree. Pan-seared scallops over grits with country ham. Each course better than the last. They ate in silence, and I watched the realization dawn on their faces with each bite. This wasn't just good food. This was art, mastery, the culmination of years of dedication they dismissed as just cooking. Everything is incredible, Mama said finally, tears streaming down her face. Baby, you're extraordinary. I know, I said simply. I always was. You just couldn't see it. Daddy cleared his throat. We want to make this right. 50% ownership, your name on the deed, full creative and operational control. 60%, I countered. And Leroy steps away completely. And I changed the name to Mama's Soul Kitchen, Emma's vision. And we donate 10% of profits to culinary scholarships for young Black chefs. They looked at each other. Mama nodded slowly. Yes. To all of it. I sat back, studying their faces. They were sincere. Desperation and regret had finally broken through their bias. I'll think about it, I said. But here's what you need to understand. I don't need Mama's Soul Kitchen anymore. I've built something better here. If I come back, it's not as a rescue mission. It's as a business merger on my terms. Are we clear? They nodded, humbled and broken. I took a breath, feeling the weight of the decision ahead of me. 3 months later, I made my choice. I didn't return to save Mama's Soul Kitchen. Instead, I made an offer to buy it outright. 70% of the purchase price came from my restaurant's profits and Raymond's backing. 30% I financed through investors who believed in my vision. Mama and Daddy accepted. They were ready to retire, exhausted by the struggle of running a restaurant without the person who'd made it special. Leroy had already moved back out of state, tail between his legs, chasing some new venture. I reopened it 6 months later as Soul Kitchen Legacy, a tribute to Grandma and to the traditions that mattered but modernized, refined mine. I installed my sous chef from Emma's Table as head chef and created a training program for young culinary students. Emma's Table remained my flagship, my heart. Soul Kitchen Legacy became my tribute to roots and redemption. But the victory felt hollow in unexpected ways. Mama attended the reopening, frail and diminished. Daddy had passed away from a heart attack 2 months after selling. The stress had taken its toll. He never got to see what I'd built from the ashes of their mistake. At the reopening, Mama pulled me aside. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. "And I'm so sorry. I see it now, what we did to you, what we stole. Your grandma would have been furious with us." I held her hand, feeling the thin bones, seeing the regret carved deep in her face. "I forgive you, Mama," I said. And I meant it, though the forgiveness tasted bittersweet. That night I stood in the kitchen of Soul Kitchen Legacy, surrounded by the ghosts of who I'd been and the reality of who I'd become. I'd won. I'd built an empire from nothing, proved every doubter wrong, reclaimed my inheritance through sheer force of will and talent. But Daddy was gone. My relationship with Elizabeth was non-existent. She'd sided with Leroy until the bitter end and now barely spoke to me. Leroy was a stranger. And Mama was a shell of herself, haunted by regrets she couldn't undo. I'd learned that victory and vindication don't heal the wounds of betrayal. They don't bring back the years of blind devotion to people who couldn't see your worth. Success can coexist with grief, triumph with loss. As I untied my apron that night, this one embroidered with owner and chef Emma, I realized I'd gotten everything I wanted and lost so much I'd never get back. Family isn't just blood. It's recognition, respect, and value given freely, not extracted through absence. I built my empire. But the cost was everyone I'd built it for. The restaurant was mine. But the family I'd sacrificed everything for was gone, replaced by expensive lessons about self-worth, boundaries, and the price of letting others define your value. I locked the door of Soul Kitchen Legacy that night, got in my car and drove past both my restaurants glowing in the darkness. Monuments to my talent, testaments to my resilience, and reminders that sometimes winning means losing everything you thought mattered. The girl who believed in family loyalty was gone. In her place stood a woman who'd learned that sometimes the only family you can trust is the one you build yourself. In kitchens that bear your name and answer to no one's expectations but your own. Success tastes sweet, but it doesn't taste like home. And that's a truth I'll carry in every dish I create for the rest of my life. If you connected with Emma's story, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and self-respect? Let's talk about it.